everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. I am your host, Mike Musto, together with Mr. Terry McGean of Hemmings, and we are going to talk about some old school muscle cars. We're going to talk about Tested, which is a show that we have that's out right now, along with a little bit of the Dodge Hornet show that is premiering later on in the week. So, Terry, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. So, for those who don't know, Terry has been doing this for a long time. Magazine editor, builder, driver, everything. I've been doing this for a long time. And I think one of the things that I wanted to touch on was a little bit in the beginning how things have changed a little bit in this industry, right? About how I don't know, we could talk a little bit about how we got into it, because I'm sure you get inundated with questions, and I do too, about how do you get into the industry, and is it still fun? Is it still enjoyable, and things of that nature? And I don't know, Terry, give everybody, you go into yours first, give everybody a quickie on how you got into the industry, and then I'll throw in too.
Okay, well, I've been asked this before, and it's funny because I didn't really think I would wind up being a magazine editor.
Yeah.
I read car magazines from the time I was a little kid. I think I started reading Hot Rod when I was 10 years old, and Carcraft around that time, and subscribed to them a couple years later. And so I kind of became a car magazine junkie, and I was reading Road and Track and Car and Driver too.
Yeah.
I just was car obsessed like a lot of us. And as I was growing up, I could not wait to get my hands on cars. I bought my first
Yeah.
car when I was 15. And in fact, my parents are starting to clean out their house. I think, they've lived in that house for over 50 years, and they're telling me and my
Yeah.
sisters it's time maybe to
Yeah. Time to
start
go.
new stuff. So I've been going through some of my old stuff, and I realized, man, I was a lunatic. Everything in my room has something to do with cars.
Yeah.
So, I went through high school and went off to college. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I got a business degree, but as I was going through college, I was realizing, even as a freshman, that I liked writing correctly. I know that
Mm.
doesn't sound so sexy as writing, but um, I like to write things the way they should be written, or the way
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
thought they should.
Appreciation for the written word. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I hadn't been a great student in high school, and so this was sort of something that emerged, like, oh, there's some aspect of school that I actually care about other than shop class. So I was finding that people I knew were coming to me to help them write papers and stuff, and I was kind of building on this, but I still had no thought
Yeah.
of being a professional writer. I graduated with that business degree, and actually was in the middle of a recession, so I couldn't get a real job. I was working for a friend of mine in his restoration shop, which I wound up doing for like 3 years. But I remember in that period right after I graduated college, Carcraft magazine was looking for a staffer, and they had put a thing in the magazine saying, if you think you could do this job,
Yeah.
send us some samples. And I was like, oh, I could, talk to myself right out of that. And continued working in the shop with my friend. And I remember they worked on a lot of Alfa Romeos there, which was a little out of my wheelhouse, but I got into that. And they were members of the club, and the newsletter would come, and the newsletter was looking for a new technical editor, somebody to write tech stories. And I said to my friend, who was also my boss, is like, we're in a shop working on these cars all the
Yeah.
time.
We do it every day.
We could easily do this. And he was like, oh no, we couldn't write that. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure we could. And he wouldn't get on board with it. So after I worked there for a couple of years, I kind of was like, I got to get myself in order here.
Yeah.
Went to school. I gotta get on the stick. I was in Pennsylvania. There was nothing happening there. I moved back to New York, and I was working for a classic car dealer in Manhattan, and knowing that that wasn't going to last because it was a terrible job. And I saw an ad for a place that published car magazines over in New Jersey, and they were looking for somebody to sell ad space. And a good friend of mine that I had been friends with since high school, had gone to college too and gotten a degree, and got a job working for Peterson Publishing in their Manhattan office. Peterson was the
Yeah.
company that Hot Rod and Motor
Yeah.
Trend and everything. and he was selling ad space. And I was like, well, I think I could do that. It seemed like a pretty cool job. I applied to the place in Jersey, which is a much smaller company that was called CSK Publishing, and I got the job. So I go there and I start selling ad space. And the person I replaced had gotten fired basically because he had taken an ad sales job, but he really wanted to be a magazine editor.
Hmm.
And the boss was kind of a hard ass. And he was very clear. He's like, you're here to, he didn't know me. He didn't know what I was
Right.
into. You're here to sell ad space. You're on this side of the office. You don't need to go over there where the editors are.
Right.
Okay. Well, of course, in reality, I'm
Yeah.
a car nerd and a car
Of course,
magazine.
you're gonna wander over there eventually.
So it took no time at all for me to start forming friendships with some of the guys who were editors. And I sold ad space for about a year. But I remember I had been there for maybe a month. It was the fall, and one of the editors had to go down to Englishtown to do some testing on his Trans Am because he was finishing a book. They were actually doing a side project. We did a Pontiac magazine there,
Yeah.
and they were doing a side project book, and he had to do this skid pad and slalom testing. He had done some stuff on his Trans Am, and nobody was available to go down with him, and they were losing weather, and he had to go. My boss's office was right behind me, and I'm at my computer being a good boy, doing my job. This guy talking. My boss must have seen my ear move like a dog,
Yeah.
you know, and because I'm just pretending I'm not even hearing them, and they're talking about who can go, and suddenly my boss is like, McGean, go down there with tomorrow and help him. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? What?
Yeah. Of course.
So I wound up going down to Englishtown with this guy who was Tom Demaro, who
Yeah.
Tom worked here at Hemmings with us for years. He and I worked at CSK for years. Tom has been a magazine editor for a long time. He and I are the same age, and we kind of grew up living the same life. He in Jersey and me in New York, not knowing each other. I go down with him. At this point, we don't really know each other real well, other than we've had lunch with a bunch of people together.
Sure.
We're down there. I remember this. He was putting his these aftermarket wheels on the Trans Am, and he's like, "I really should torque these lug nuts, but I don't really know what the hell these should be torqued to." And I'm just had to this point kind of been the helper, and I was like,
Sure.
"Well, 85 is probably good. 85 pound feet's probably good with that size stud because blah blah." He's like, and he's just looking at me like,
Yeah. Like, how do you know this
and
again?
I still remember he said, "How the hell do you know that?"
Yeah.
Well, and then we started talking more,
Yeah.
and about a year later, the boss, I still minded my P's and Q's, and I did fine with ad sales. I didn't love it, but they were figuring out that I knew more about cars than I was letting
Yeah.
on. And they gave me a chance to jump the fence.
Yeah.
I wrote a couple articles for a couple of the editors. One was Richard Lentinello, who was
Yep.
the editor in chief here at Hemmings for years. And the other was Jim Camposano, who was the editor of Muscle Mustangs Fast Forwards. He was another guy who'd been a magazine editor forever. He's still around. They both liked what I did. I wound up becoming an editor. So I was a staff editor for like 2 months, and then something shifted, and they're like, "We need somebody to be the editor of High Performance Pontiac. So I think you can do it. So you're the editor of the magazine." I was like, wait, I just started doing this.
Right.
You're going to be fine. It was
Yeah.
Richard. No, he's like, "You'll be fine."
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
became the editor of a magazine 2 months in, and did that for a couple years. Jeff Koch also worked at CSK Publishing. Jeff also works here at Hemmings with
Yep.
us. Jeff left the company, moved to California because he was determined to go to work for Peterson Publishing. And he made that happen. And he
Yeah.
wound up getting a job at Hot Rod. And Hot Rod had a new editor at the time, Ro McGonigal, who had been an editor many years before, came back, wanted to build his own staff, was from Jersey himself, and was trying to push out the people who'd been there and some of the West
Yeah.
Coast guys, I think. I got a chance, I got the gig, and so I moved to California, and I was a tech editor to Hot Rod, and that was great. And it was me, Jeff Koch, Steve Mignanti,
Yeah.
um,
Oh
Ray
wow.
Baskerville had been on staff forever and was kind of an institution, and Roe. So I did Hot Rod for a few years. Another shuffle happened. I became the editor of Rod and Custom. I did that for a couple of years. Another shuffle. I wound up working on Carcraft. So I worked out there for 8.5 years total. And I had gotten married during that time. My wife was from the East Coast also. Um, we were trying to start a family. That company seemed like it was starting to maybe go downhill. It changed
Yeah.
hands like 3 times while I worked
Yeah,
there.
I remember that.
In the meantime, California real estate just went, and I was like,
I
we're
know that
never
feeling.
going to buy a house out here. The Hemmings thing came up, and I thought, well, we can move back east. Seems like a good opportunity. I know some people who work there. They seem to
Sure.
want me. And
Yeah.
that was 17 years ago, and I'm still here. So
Wow.
um, it's an unconventional path, but I don't really think there are necessarily conventional paths to this kind of work. Whenever these stories are told, I mean, there are people who like, I want to work at a car magazine. One of the funnier stories I think is Jeff Smith, who I introduced you
Hmm.
to Jeff, and
Yeah.
I was reading. Jeff was the editor of Hot Rod magazine when I was in high school, and then later I wound up working alongside Jeff. Jeff will tell you that he's one of those guys who kind of went out of high school, went to work in a shop, didn't like it, went to college, and basically went through college knowing that he wanted to work at Carcraft magazine.
That's
And when he's
great.
getting toward the end of his time at college, one of his professors was talking to him like, "What do you want to do? And you're going to be graduating soon." I want to work at Carcraft magazine. Well, what's that? Well, it's a car magazine. It's in California. Do you know anybody who works there? No. How many people are editors on the staff of Carcraft? 5. So there are 5 people on work on this one magazine.
Right.
This is your plan? And Jeff's like, yes, that's what I want to do. And he says, his teacher's like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
The odds of you getting that job are unbelievably slim. Well, somehow one of Jeff's roommates knew another guy, and Jeff gets
Yeah.
a job at Carcraft, and Jeff worked there for like 40 years, not
You
just at
know,
Carcraft, but at that company.
I think it's interesting. I think if you find something that you like, I mean, and I did very much the same thing kind of that you did, right? Went to college, wasn't the best student by any means, but I could write. And I remember having a professor that she goes at, every one of my top writing professors, she would laugh at everything that I wrote. And she would write back great comments like, this is way over the top for the subject matter, or you're really pushing the boundaries here, or stuff like that. But, behind everything, she's like, but it's good. And that's what I always remembered. I'm like, it was just, you just remember that. You're like, but it's good. You're a good writer. You could do this. And, then you graduated, did the same thing, try to go out and find a regular job. And I worked everything from working for a printing company to then working as a coder when the web first came out, doing HTML and XML and stuff like that as a designer for an investment bank, and worked my way up there as kind of a designer. And then 9/11 happened, and they tried to drop 2 buildings on our heads, and we were like, this sucks. And so it was that point where, because I was down there, I said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to, because it was one of those things where it was at a big corporation. And the first thing that they said, literally when the Twin Towers came down, was, we understand something tragic has happened and you almost died, but we need you back at work the next day. To which my opinion was, what are you, insane?
Yeah.
And it was that where I made a very conscious decision to, I was like, you know what? At that point, I was huge into racing motorcycles and doing 2 wheels, but I was always an enthusiast. But being in the New York area, you couldn't really have that many cars because there was no place to put them.
Yeah.
That's what happened. But after I made the conscious decision that I wanted to be a writer and start to get into media, I just started writing. And I would write this is when the internet was really just starting up and blogs were a big thing, right? And I would write about cars, but any car. Like, I would do a review of your 15-year-old Toyota Corolla that had, mismatched tires and mismatched headlights, but it taught me how to write. And I would give it to whatever website would publish it, whatever, a blog would publish it. And part of it, and I'm not saying I was a great writer back then, but the internet has a funny way of correcting you and kind of keeping you on task, right? The internet the general public is wonderful about telling you how badly you suck. They
Yeah.
love doing that. You stink at this. This is okay. You need to work on this. But that's how you kind of refine your craft, whether it's a writer or whether it's as a videographer or whether it's as a host or whatever the case is, right? And little by little, it's determination. Like the hosting thing came up because I knew a bunch of guys in New York. We all kind of came up together, like myself and Matt Farah and Larry Casilla and a bunch of the guys. We started the Drive Network back then. And you just realize like somebody puts a camera in front of you, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't really suck at this. Like I'm not fabulous, but I'm not terrible either. And little by little, you keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And as long as the public likes you more than they hate you, you're in a pretty good spot. As soon as you have the public defending you from other comments and other people, that's how you're like, oh, I can make a go at this.
Yeah, you had the internet and you were right there at the beginning of that. I started at the magazines in 94. So it
Mm-hmm.
was right before,
Right before.
most people knew about the internet. And it kind of blossomed as I was there. And we had a kind of a version of what you were talking about. When I worked at CSK, that was a small company. We did 7 magazines, but there were only like 43 people working in the whole company.
Yeah.
Most of us were under 30 at that point. The
Yeah.
managers were over, but it was a real sort of an incubator. And it sounds like you had a similar thing with the circle of guys you were doing that
Yeah.
stuff. We were, all of us were relatively new at what we were doing. I was very new at it. And we were able to bounce stuff off each other. And even though we didn't have the internet to give us like instantaneous feedback, the mail did do the same thing. It just took a little longer, but it was
Right.
amazing. It was a similar thing, just a little slower, where if you wrote something in the magazine, and you know how it is with car people, if you get
Oh,
it wrong, boy, they're going
oh,
to let you.
they're letting you know.
And I think some of the guys I worked with there are still traumatized by, you know, some of the negative stuff they got. But it does, like you say, it you get kind of guided by being battered back and forth
Yeah.
down the straight and narrow, and you
Yeah.
learn. And then if you have a circle of people around you who are also doing the same thing, like you did and I did, you hone your craft, as you
You
say.
do.
Um, and then the paths are all
Different.
they're all
They're all over the map. I mean, it's funny because like one of my biggest things was I like as a kid I used to read Hemmings all the time, but I also used to read Hot Rod and Carcraft, and it's it's been interesting because like I've written, I don't know, a bunch of cover stories for Hot Rod magazine, and I've done stuff in Hemmings and with Carcraft, and it's somebody from the East Coast being able to write for publications such as these and kind of have your words featured or your videos featured there, or like we're doing the new series Tested on Hemmings, is an amazing thing because it's one of those things where we used to read them as children, and we
mm-hmm.
used to watch these things, and like I used to watch like shows like Motor Week religiously. Like Motor Week would come on, I would sit down, I would watch John Davis go on camera, and I'm like, and I don't know why I never thought it was a job. I felt like
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I was like, that's not a real job. Like nobody actually does that.
Well, there
You
was
know,
so little car
there was
based television. That was one of
nothing.
the only things there was.
Yeah. So I would look at that, and then I would read Road and Track and everything else, and go, well, somebody had to do this. There's some person behind these words. There's some person behind the camera. There's some person behind the wheel. And then it was like, well, how do I become that person? And so little by little, like I worked from everything for car dealerships. I worked for event service companies like Page One and ESI and all these companies. And for
Yeah.
those that don't know, there are event service companies that literally set up events for manufacturers, and they supply journalists with automobiles to road test and review and things like that. And I worked for those companies because I was like, well, if I'm going to know the industry, I better figure it out from the inside out. This way, when I'm on the outside, I can get an idea of how it actually works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, and then like I tell everybody, and then once you have an idea of what you want to do, you give 10 years of your life away for free. And you basically try to make a name for yourself.
Yeah.
And hopefully you can. And if you can stick it out, then it's an amazing place to be. But I will tell everyone, it is not easy. It's a tough gig. It's fun
No,
and super rewarding, but it's hard.
I'm sure you have heard over the years, as I have, and all the other guys here, you'll run into people and you'll encounter people at events out in the world. and they will all say to you, oh, you've got the best job in the world. You got the best job in the world. And it's like, well, it's cool, but it's a
It's
job. It's
work.
a lot of work.
It's a lot
And
of work.
I don't people who've known me for years know, you know, how much work it is. And it's just the nature of deadlines of publishing, right? Traditional publishing.
Absolutely.
What you're doing is the same thing with whether you're doing, a podcast. It's got to be done at a certain time, and
Hmm.
you got a lot of work to do before the cameras even roll.
Yeah.
And with the video shows you're doing, same deal. You got to get everything set up. You got to do your research. You got all the logistics of bringing everything together, and then
Yeah.
even after it's done, there's all the editing to do afterwards. So what is seen, whether it's seen on the printed page or seen on the screen, I mean, there was a lot more work that had to go into making
Yeah.
that happen. And it's, you know, yeah, we go to events like that was, oh, you're so lucky you get to do this for your job. And it's like, well, but you're here with your car having fun. I'm running around with a camera.
I'm
So
working. Yeah.
yeah, it's been um it's a great thing for guys like us who love
Yeah.
cars and we're working with things we like. But you definitely sweat for it. Why do we keep doing it? Because we keep enjoying it. We
But
keep
I think
like
I
matters.
think that's the thing. I mean, we've got, if you guys go to the Hemmings YouTube channel right now, we just launched a series called Tested. We're on our third week. And Tested is a show. They think of it as NOS car reviews, right? New old stock car reviews. So we'll take a stock, like the episode that goes up today is a 1969 Camaro Z28 4-speed car. The owner has had it for 50 years. You know what I mean? It is, but these are stock vehicles. They're not modified. And the reason we did that is to give everybody an idea of what these vehicles are like to truly drive, to own, to experience. And it's kind of neat. So if you get a chance, go and check it out. With that said, the amount of work that goes in there, and Ryan, who's producing this, Ryan Douthit, who's producing this, it does the majority of our filming for that show, all the filming for that show. It's a huge amount of work because, where you see Mike Musto behind the wheel being like, this thing is great. I'm having so much fun, blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's part of it. But you also don't see us getting up at 5:30. You don't see us getting to set until 7. Then you don't see us setting up until 9. Then you don't see us shooting until 7 o'clock at night. And then you don't see the camera guys going back and downloading and dumping footage
Right.
until 11:30 at night, waking up the next day and then starting to cut stuff. So, like, I couldn't even tell you the last time I had a normal 8-hour day. Like, those, if you do any type of production or stuff like that, 8-hour day doesn't exist. So if you want to do any type of media for automotive, understand this. You are going to work. You are going to work not 8-hour days. You're going to work 12-hour days. You're going to work 14. You're going to work 16-hour days. You're not going to work 40 hours a week. You're going to work 100 hours a week. Or you're going to work 80 hours a week. Right. And, but I will tell you that you'll still have the best job of any of your friends. When you go out and you tell people what you do, they'll be like, you have the best job. And in hindsight, yes, I just worked a 100-hour week, but yeah, it was still kind of fun.
Yeah, there's when people if somebody's listening to this and they're hearing, oh my God, 100-hour week or 12-hour day, that sounds pretty horrible. So
Yeah.
why are we doing this? Well, because even when it's grueling, there's two things. We're working with something we're passionate about. That is a motivator, obviously. There's also gratification at the end. All the stuff you went through to produce each one of those videos,
Yeah.
all the stuff you guys went through when you were doing the other series as you did with, when you're trying to bring cars and car
Mm-hmm.
owners and weather and camera crews
Oh,
together.
huge.
Um, but when it's done and you see the final product, that's like a recharge, right? It makes you go out and okay, I'm going to do it again because,
Yeah.
and you forget about a lot of the, I mean, you forget and you don't like, the late nights or the aggravation, a lot of
Yeah.
that kind of burns away and you go back to it. So again, if it was pure 12-hour day shoveling rocks, yeah, we'd probably
Different.
not still be doing this, but
Different.
it's
Yeah.
not. And so it's an interesting kind of, I was going to say lifestyle. It's an interesting career, but it kind of it has a lot to do with your lifestyle because
It,
of what
yeah.
you said. You kind of have to live around it. And
That's a great way to put it. It was very funny when we had just finished, myself and Ryan and Nick, our whole crew. We just built this Dodge Hornet. It's the first custom Dodge Hornet on the planet. Wide body, slammed. It looks really cool. Big wheels, tires, the whole deal. Um, During the build, there's so much. We basically lived in LA for 5 weeks building this car. Um, and the guys were shooting 12, 14-hour days every single day. And it's a build. It's hard. Terry, you and I are going to go through it in 2 weeks. Terry and I are, and the rest of the junior, and we're at Ryan shooting it. We're doing a Fox body build up in Bennington, on a really cool concept that we've talked about before. We'll bring it up a little later. You know, we do these things, and during the builds, I go, "Don't ever ask me to do another build show. I'm never doing another build show." And Ryan and Nick were making fun of me because literally that night at dinner, they were like, you said that, and then at dinner you were like, so the next time we do a build show. And because it's like,
yeah,
you part of you, I think you have to be a little bit of a masochist. There's a little self-punishment going on there, but that if you can get through it, as you said, your words, your video, your podcast, whatever it is that you do, is very cool. And I think the biggest part of it is because at day's end, it makes other people smile, and it makes other people go, I'm really glad that they did that for us. Right.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There is a payoff, and it isn't even just. It's not like an ego thing.
No.
There's just a gratification in, well, I did this. It took a while, but look, people like it.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy. We were doing the right thing. This was good. Let's do it
Yeah.
again.
Right.
And as you were talking about the shooting schedules, I was thinking back to particularly when I worked in California. Again, a lot of younger guys doing stuff, and we would get involved in projects where even though we weren't doing video, again, those magazine publishing dates
Yeah.
would wind up leaving us, I'm going to do this tech story for the next issue. And, younger guys, not great at planning. You're in the shop the night before, and,
Oh shit. Now I gotta write something.
we'd be in the shop doing the work, right?
Yeah.
Still doing the install and taking the
Yeah.
picture. Now when digital cameras, that was a boon,
It's
man. That was
huge.
because when I started doing this, we were still shooting film.
We're making ourselves sound really old. You know that,
Not
Terry.
to date myself, but and when we were shooting tech, we would shoot black and white, and that was even for the time that process was kind of ancient. Like you'd have to take your
Yeah.
film, send it out, get it processed, get it back, then mark off the prints you want, send that back out
Right.
for the prints. I remember shooting color film one night. We were doing a story that I had to get done, and I just went and got like at the drugstore color print film, shot it in that, walked across the street to the 24-hour photo, got those prints, and I was like, you can just scan these in and make them black and white. We would
Right.
do stuff like that all the time. But I guess what I was getting to is I can remember lying in the shop. There's that time from 3 to 4 in the morning, probably more than that.
I totally know where you're going.
That is the darkest hour of night
Yeah.
in more ways than one. That is the it
That's
is the
great.
part where your brain starts
You're
to
toast.
go
You're
away,
done.
and
Yeah.
where you really are questioning your choices, not just on that day, but in life.
Yeah.
You power through that, you come out the other side and you get it done, and that part kind of goes away as long
Yeah.
as something came out of it that was good. um yeah, there's something sort of nutty about our particular sect of the creative world where
Yeah.
we suffer for it and then forget about a lot of the suffering and just keep doing it.
We
But
do. But it is
we're
fun there that you have these. The good definitely outweighs the bad. I think a lot of times, again, enormous amount of work, but it is fun. And every now and then you'll have these epiphany moments where you realize that. I remember one time I was down in at Willow Springs Raceway, and I was doing a road test. We were testing, of all things, we're testing 911s. and I didn't want to be there. I was shot. I was tired. And it was not 4 a.m. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. It was hot. And I was sitting there in this $150,000 911. And my job is to just go out and drive it fast. Go ahead, Mike, go evaluate this stuff. Okay, great. Sounds good. But I didn't want to be there. I was tired. And my dad just happened to call. Hey, Pop, what's going on? What's going on? Where are you right now? There's a lot of noise. I'm at the racetrack. What are you doing? I don't want to be here. I want to go home. I'm tired. And I would just bitch. He goes, wait a minute. He goes, you're sitting on a racetrack in new 911s and you're complaining? He's like, you have no right. And as soon as he said, I was like, son of a bitch, because he was right. And then all of a sudden, it makes you take a step back and you go, you know what? There are literally people that would kill to do what I do.
Yeah, there are those moments when you
And
can.
there are those
reality.
moments of clarity that come in, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I can bitch, but then again, I can't really bitch to anybody because they're gonna want to punch my eye closed if I
Yeah,
do when they hear what I'm bitching about. So you gotta be, you know, um, but it's fun. It's just fun. But I will say, and I think Terry will say the same thing. If you do want to get into automotive, it's time. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of patience. It's a lot of perseverance. It's a lot of failure. It's a ton of failure. People love to tell you how bad you suck, and they'll keep doing that until you prove them wrong. Um, but then there's a payoff. There's a payoff when you see your words or you see your video or what have you, you know?
yeah. This our world is, it's shifted, it's evolving. So the paths are again changing.
Mm-hmm.
When you talked earlier about the internet, and then, uh, you know, of course there were websites, then blogs emerged, and that was a whole new way for people to get their writing out there. And today we have people who are known, published automotive writers who started by writing for blogs, and it actually it made it a little easier, I think, for people to get a toe in and prove themselves. So that was a good thing. It's still a good thing. Um, there's not as many magazines as there used to be, but now video is a much bigger thing than it ever was before,
Yeah,
accessible than it ever was before.
sure.
So it keeps evolving.
And
Um,
now we have to deal with as writers and as journalists and everything else. You have to deal with AI because that's fun.
yeah, that's the next thing coming. That's going to be real interesting because we're going to start seeing. I'm sure it's already out there, but it's going to probably become more prevalent that you'll see stuff written, and we're going to develop our tells for, oh yeah, this is,
Mm,
and that'll evolve, and it's just going to keep going. And I guess the takeaway there, if there is one, is if you want to do something like this, because there isn't really a set way to do it, kind of like you were saying earlier, you just kind of have to figure out what you think you want to do and start working at it, even if
yeah,
you have a job doing it, and try to find where you can get in somewhere, maybe write something that, again, internet writing provides an opportunity to, because there's so many people looking for content, it provides an opportunity to provide content for people who don't have big budgets, right? That's one way that you can
yeah,
say, hey, look, I'll write something for you. You don't have to pay me for this one. Not that anybody should give their work away, but when you're just at that first step, if it gives you something where you can say, look, I wrote this and it's
yeah.
here, and you should read it. Maybe that's your way in. Who knows? YouTube, right? I mean, YouTube is,
Video's the same way, radio's the same way, podcasting is the same way. One of the things that my dad always told me was that, if you think it's cool, somebody else is going to think it's cool too. And I
mhm.
think that's an unbelievably true statement.
That's good advice.
So yeah, and it was great. So well, that was 40 minutes. Okay, so there you go. Terry and I just told you how to get into automotive journalism. Um, it's your choice whether you want to do it or not. I can tell you for doing this a long time, I'm sure Terry can too. You get a lot of fun out of it at times. There are times when you, like Terry said, you'll have that 3 a.m. moment where
Yeah.
you'll question your life choices.
Yeah.
But when the words come out, the video comes out, the podcast comes out, everything shows up, and you turn around and you're making other people smile and think and kind of guide them in a way that is fun, right? Because when you think about it, what we do is fun. Automobiles are fun. We do this hobby because if we didn't do it, Terry and I would probably still be on the phone bullshitting about cars and talking about like,
Right.
so like, why not figure out a way to do it for a living? And if you can do that, you're in pretty good shape, I think. You know?
Yeah, I've realized I can't turn this part of my brain off. So if I wasn't doing this for a living, like you said, I'd have to be finding some way to do something with it. So yeah, if you have that kind of sickness like we do, place
Yeah.
to be.
Dive right in. So on that, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Obviously, Hemmings, we've got. I want you to go to the YouTube channel and check out our new program. We tested. We have Hornet coming out. A couple of other shows, Sports and Exotics. We're resurrecting. That's coming back. That used to be an old print title. That's coming back, and we've got Jethro Bobbington, who's one of the former hosts of Top Gear US, who's doing that. It's gonna be a great show. And then if you're looking for any cars, check out the classifieds. Check out the auctions. We've got some amazing stuff. Terry, sir, thank you for coming on as always. It's always great to see you. And Terry and I will be back on in the not too distant future because, like I said earlier, we are building a Fox Body Mustang in 2 weeks. And we are filming an entire series on that. It's called Rehab. We did it last year with an IROC Camaro. We're doing it this year with a Fox. Yeah,
Probably
so just
be some more 3 a.m.
3 a.m.
life
Yeah,
choice questions, but
yeah,
doing it again, we don't learn. So
exactly. So
um,
go. Yeah, I think it's gonna be fun, Ter. We'll have a good
yeah,
time doing it.
the last time was good, and knock wood, this time will be good too.
I think so.
We'll figure it out and we'll enjoy it.
Yeah. Good. All right. So, folks, go to the Hemmings YouTube channel, like and subscribe everything you see. This way, you'll get alerts when the series goes up. And that's it. We'll see you next time on the Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. Terry, thanks again, brother.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast and hit that subscribe button. And we'll come to you every week.